I'm excited that you next will have one of what we call in the Templeton Civil Rights Civic Virtue Grant a community exemplar, someone who's made a difference in our local community, and you'll learn about why. I'm Lynn Stallings. I'm one of the co-directors of the grant. I'm so thankful that you all have been here and have gotten to learn about each other's work all day. I've asked the other co-director, Dr. Dewana Duncombe-Hayden, to introduce our speaker tonight. So, Dr. Duncombe-Hayden.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Ladies and gentlemen, get ready to be inspired by a visionary who doesn't just think outside the box. He paints it, transforms it, and turns it into a community masterpiece. Our next speaker is a powerhouse of purpose, passion, and placemaking. Based in Montgomery, Alabama, Kevin King is a community-rooted leader, creative strategist, and cultural organizer who knows how to turn vacant spaces into vibrant sanctuaries of art and opportunity. As the founder and executive director of the King's Canvas, Mr. King has cultivated more than a gallery. He's built a movement. Since 2018, he's led the transformation of an abandoned building in the Washington Parkneighborhood into a thriving center where artists don't just create, they flourish. Kevin King is a master of creative placemaking, using art to tell untold stories, ignite local pride, and reimagine what neighborhoods can become. Whether it's developing cultural districts or advising cities across the nation through his consulting firm of creative community strategies, he brings people, place, and purpose into powerful alignment. In 2024, Kevin King again redesigned the tapestry of West Montgomery by opening the King's Canvas, a new art gallery on Oak Street along the historic Selma to Montgomery March Trail, an achievement that stands as both a creative milestone and a symbol of hope, heritage, and what happens when community and vision collide. Please join me in welcoming a leader who helps communities not just see what is possible, but believe it, build it, and bring it to life. Mr. Kevin King.
So I'm gonna need an invoice from you. A W-9. Because I owe you a check for that. That was awesome. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. So before I get started, by show of hands, geographically, do you know what Washington Park is? Has anyone ever been to Washington Park? This room, show of hands. Okay. All right. So we've had a few people that's been to Washington Park. And I'm sorry to the camera lady. I do need to step down because I do need to see what I'm doing. Is that okay? Step up to the side. All right. So. Testing. Okay. All right, so we're just gonna get right into it. I'm Kevin King. I'm the founder, executive director of the King's Canvas Gallery Studio located in West Montgomery. Just to let you know a little bit about me, I'm originally from Mobile, Alabama. I've been in Montgomery for about 23 years, so that's half of my life. But I spent all of my summers and spring breaks in Montgomery visiting my dad and other relatives growing up. So I've always considered Montgomery a second home. Grew up doing art, but I stopped around 17 years old because well-meaning adults told me, hey Kevin, this art thing is cool, but you need to pick a real major, get a real job, So I went to Tuskegee University to major in mechanical engineering, trying to figure out how do I interweave my art in engineering aspect, and the design aspect. And it take long to figure out that engineering or designing in engineering doesn't give us as artists the creative freedom that we desire. And so I ended up getting out of it and started a nonprofit in West Montgomery. I don't know if you've ever heard of Common Ground Montgomery. Anybody heard of Common Ground? Okay, I'm the co-founder of Common Ground. So I have about 19 years of community-based organization experience, nonprofit experience, working with Common Ground for about 12 years. And once I left Common Ground, I started the King's Campus in West Montgomery, the community where we were already rooted in, right? And so Oak Street is, and I'm gonna get to that in a minute. I'm a visual artist. I started back doing art in 2013, and I ended up understanding that was an art scene that didn't exist for those in Montgomery who would be considered marginalized at that time. A lot of things have changed since then, but at that time, a lot of the art institutions, if you were a black artist, our work looked a little different. Wasn't really accepted in a lot of these spaces. They would say, hey, it's good, but it just doesn't fit the aesthetics of what we're trying to accomplish here in this particular space, so we had to have a place. And being an advocate that I am, I said, well, how do I create an ecosystem or be a part of an ecosystem that would allow everyone to come in and we could be more inclusive, not just for those who will be marginalized, but for everybody. And I'm unapologetic for those who are marginalized. And so at the time, I'm trying to figure out how do I support local artists in Montgomery who don't have the same opportunity as some. I flew out to Phoenix, Arizona at a conference led by Earth-Based America. And they talked about this thing called creative placemaking. I was invited by a friend. He said, Kevin, you're about the community and you love art. And I think this creative placemaking thing may be a lane that you may want to decide to eventually run in and implement in your own community one day. And I'm gonna tell you, y'all, I hate reading from slides. I absolutely can't stand it. So I'm gonna ask somebody else to do what I can't stand to do. Just if I need a loud voice, okay. Please do. I don't want to read from the slide. But I have to do it because we have to get to the bottom of what creative placemaking is, and I'm gonna break down this definition.
So I just need to read.
Yeah, just go ahead and read it.
The term creative placemaking was coined in 2010 by and Godwall Nicodemus for the National Endowment for the Arts. Creative placemaking is a process that uses arts and culture to shape the physical and social character of a community. It's a collaborative approach that involves a variety of partners, including artists, designers, community members, and community developers. The goal is to improve community in a number of ways, including economic development, social change, environmental sustainability, sense of place, community ownership, aesthetic appeal.
Okay, so usually when I'm speaking at conferences, I don't have to have this slide because it's usually people who know what creative placemaking is at those conferences. But, you know, when I added it, I was like, man, I do not want to do this. So basically, I'm going to give you a simple definition of it because that's a bunch of jargon that sometimes we don't understand. Creative placemaking usually involves public and private partnership. That means you have a private entity like my organization, the King's Canvas, and a public entity, usually municipalities, our city government, our county, our state. And the simple definition is using the arts as a conduit to address issues of community and economic development. Oftentimes, in our city, in our county, in our state, when we think of economic development, we think of big businesses, right? We think of the Hyundai plant and all of its suppliers. We think of the hospitals. We think of Coca-Cola. We think of Koch Foods, airport, AUM, institutions that employ a lot of people. But I've asked the question to our county commissioners years ago, how does economic development look in communities like Washington Park, that have been historically marginalized, that have been disenfranchised in a lot of ways. How does it look in those areas? Because it doesn't trickle down. A lot of our neighbors who work at a lot of these places, eventually they make enough money and they move out. But for those who don't move out, guess what's happening? They drive my home back to Washington Park, back to Gibbs Village, back to Ridgecrest, Mobile Heights, and these areas like that. And they drive past a bunch of vacant and abandoned properties, and they don't have to drive past a bunch of vacant and abandoned properties. Because we have a realistic strategy to implement that would allow those areas to thrive. And I don't know, for those of you who have been out to the King's campus, you've seen a picture of that, you've seen a glimpse of it. But for me, this is what I'm trying to show. I'm trying to demonstrate that in communities that are historically marginalized, communities that are not as resourced as others, that we can actually implement practices so these areas can begin to thrive again. And this is what you're about to see. So, founded in 2017, like I said, we were founded because I wanted to address an issue that a lot of our artists had at the time. But I also lived in that neighborhood at that time. I lived in that neighborhood for about 12 years. I moved out in around 2020. When we worked with Common Ground, that was one of our strategies, living in the community, becoming a part of the fabric of the community for the purpose of neighborhood transformation. So this is my neighborhood. Since it's my neighborhood, I care deeply about it. I'm not driving in and driving out. This is my neighborhood. Still my neighborhood, even though I no longer live there. Obviously, we're about creative placemaking, and as far as our artists are concerned, we want to provide opportunity and access for underdeveloped and underexposed artists. And in doing all that, we believe that we can actually transform the community. So, for those of you who've been to Washington Park, have you ever heard of the 7 Montgomery March? All of us have heard that. When I asked that all over the nation, no one has ever heard of the 7 Montgomery March, so I don't mean no offense. But do you know that at campsite 4, which is St. Jude, there were 4 campsites. The first 3 campsites were owned by families between the Edmund Pettus Bridge and right before Montgomery. But the 4th campsite was owned by an institution, St. Jude. When the marchers marched, their final day of the march, before Dr. King delivered his address, dealing with voters' rights at our Capitol that affected our 1965 Voting Rights Act, they had this big festival. Dr. Martin Luther King, Coretta Scott King, Samuel Davis Jr., Harry Belafonte, Nina Simone. It was all of these stars, movie stars, actors, comedians. They had this big festival, this concert, and the whole community came together just to celebrate what was about to happen that next day. That happened at St. Jude. The house that I used to live in, I could step out of my front yard and see back to St. Jude. All up and down that street, a lot of those marchers stayed in the home. The home that I bought and renovated in that community, history says that there were marchers who also stayed in their home. I heard that from some previous owners. So that's who we are. And it was important for the King's campus to be on the 7 Montgomery March Trail because I was staying out there sometime before we moved into that facility, and I would see buses. They would be in St. Jude. They would take a picture in front of the campsite 4 sign. Next stop is the Capitol. So I said, there are no destination places along the trail, along the last leg of the trail. How do people get out of their cars, get out of their buses, stop, pull over, and engage in the history that took place in the community? How do they hear about this neighborhood and what happened in the neighborhood? How do they hear about the history of the neighborhood? How are they able to do that? What can we do that would encourage people to want to pull over? This was a huge reason why it happened. Now we'll read this. So a friend of mine, Skip Jackson, he's older than me, and he remembers that particular community before the interstate ran through the community. Some of you probably remember that. Skip said, I can remember the day when they brought the big earth movers out there. We knew it was coming. When the people who owned their homes started to move, we knew that was coming. Just like any neighborhood that's poor, you don't argue. All it did for us was kill our neighborhood. I talked to the griots and the elders in our community, like Georgette Norman. I hear her talk about all the businesses that used to be in the community. I hear talk about how much synergy existed between a lot of those businesses. She talked about how it would be 3 or 4 businesses in a row in a complex right next to one another. And the owners would get together and collectively decided that that they would not sell the same product because collaboration over competition was important. When this happened, and this happened all over the nation, right? We all know that. The unique thing about Montgomery, our city government and our county tells the story of Sam Engelhardt and how it was done intentionally. And we know it was done intentionally. But the blessing and the curse for us is that the guy was caught on record saying that he wanted to run the interstate through Abernathy's church in retaliation for the Montgomery bus boycott. That 381 days that black people in Montgomery decided that we would no longer ride the bus because we would no longer suffer inhumane treatment. And I'm paying you to mistreat me, and I'm riding the bus like everyone else. This happened in our community. 1,400 families were displaced in Montgomery. 1,400 households. If you owned your home, you got an average of $3,000 for your home. If you did not own your home, you had to go somewhere. You were displaced. At the same time this was happening, Gibbs Village Housing Authority was built. And a lot of the residents who lived in a lot of those homes, whose homes were confiscated in the eminent domain, they moved to public housing. So for us, excuse me, it was important for us to be in this community, because I said, I'm wondering if our community can have a shot at thriving here. Because you know what? When they built those interstates, particularly in our neighborhood, they built the off-ramps. So what happens when cars are passing by your community who once were able to shop in that community, engage in commerce in that community, constantly driving by, going to the next exits. They are going to those exits and circling back, coming back to them. Because the community was heading south, was heading east at the time. So the community economically died. Houses became abandoned, the few that were left. Businesses that existed, they were thriving, they were gone. So the community started economically dying. So it's important for us to select a location in our approach. Select a facility that's not on the trail, but select a facility that we can even have a shot at instilling a sense of community pride at some point. And bring in tourism, right? We wanted to be intentional about our business collaborations. I'm gonna get to this in a second. You're gonna see some of the businesses that we collaborate with. In our space, I said, what if we move into space, what if we can get the attention of the outside world as well as the local and broader community? And then what if we can bring people from the outside to frequent these spaces again? What if businesses decide to move back into the community again? Because 5 years ago, no one wanted to be over here. Other than a few businesses that were still existing. And they were legacy, because they had been there for a while. Brenda's Barbecue's been there for 80 years, and they hadn't had a bad day. They hadn't had a bad day in 80 years. There's another spot, Barbara Gale's, same family. Larry's been there for about 20 years, and his breakfast spot is booming. And so a few of us who live in that area, we know that there's a few places that we're able to go, to buy food. We don't have any grocery stores over there. Calhoun Foods is gone. So we said, what if we could be intentional about our business collaborations and create an ecosystem that would foster opportunities for people to actually move back into the community. We also wanted to prioritize preserving culture. I was listening to Spike Lee one day. He was talking about, and this is pretty funny, but it's not funny, but pretty ironic. There was a group from Brooklyn visiting us yesterday, and they stayed here. They'll be here Friday. I was hanging out with a few of them last night. But we were talking about how certain areas in New York are being gentrified in some of the boroughs, specifically Brooklyn. I heard Spike Lee talk about the guy who would beat on the drums, and he would have his bucket out. It would be busking, that's what we call it. Speed on the drums is entertaining. You know, people put money in the bucket. He could possibly pay his rent, possibly play his light bill. It's been entertainment because tourists are coming, right? But at some point, once the area started being gentrified, that behavior was no longer acceptable. Now, they call it 911. Now they create noise ordinances because that's no longer acceptable. And so for us, we ask the question in our community, what's the culture of our community, the elements that are central to Washington Park, things that we want to keep. And so we're constantly having conversations in our community about if this happens or when this happens, how do we actually preserve the culture? So that's an ongoing discussion. We also want to be cognizant of potential displacement. Under the umbrella of Common Ground, we started a housing organization called House to House. Now it's ran by a guy by the name of Pastor CJ, started by Mike Buns. But House to House owns probably over 30 homes in the neighborhood, provide decent housing, newly renovated home, and some new constructions for some people in the community. And so we're very adamant about people who are from the community being able to live in decent housing from the community. Because I don't know what you know about Washington Park, but people don't care how I look. You proud to be from Washington Park. You're proud to be from the west side. You're throwing up your W's. You know, you're telling people you're from the west side. Don't look like other places in our city, but people love being from the west side. And as a group of individuals who don't want to leave and go anywhere, they want to be able to live in the neighborhood they grew up in. They want to be able to have that choice. But when it's not decent housing, there's no shot in doing it. And so we do have a housing development organization in our community that's making sure that some people are able to still continuously live in that community and not be displaced. And ultimately, we want to see our community thrive again, not just survive. So this is our building. I started with a plan, with an initial plan. A lot of the artists at the time said, Kevin, we don't have conducive spaces to create. I said, you know what? I don't either. I have my easel in the front of my house. I'm accumulating a lot of artwork. I'm not at the King's Canvas at the time. I'm still at Common Ground. I'm accumulating a lot of art. I'm getting paint all on the walls. You know, my house is beautiful, by the way. You don't want to get paint on the walls, right? Some people need a studio access. And a lot of these artists will do because they say, yeah, well, we don't even know what supplies are. I know we like to create, but I draw or paint. I want to do all sorts of things. I don't know what I need. And so I started doing these art supply drives. People started hitting up our Amazon link and sending art supplies to us. Now the studio's packed. The artists just trying to figure it out. And to them it's a safe haven. To them it's therapeutic. To them it's an escape away from their reality. And it allows them to get into a creative space that provides some sort of healing for them. That's connecting with other artists, being outside of their homes, having some sort of shared vision. Being in a space where you have a shared vision with people who are like-minded. People said, hey, they didn't say this, but what they needed was an art career. So that's what we're building at this time, out of this building right here. So we decided to do a community charrette. And I'm really big on elevating voices from the community. I'm really big on not going into spaces, telling people what they need. Really big on going in and listening and letting the community dictate what it needs instead of us doing it for them. So I did a charrette. The youngest person in there was 7 years old. The oldest person was 90. All from Gibbs Village in Washington Park, surrounding community. Now, we had to start with a vision, right? We didn't start at the ground level. As a visionary leader, I knew what we needed to do. You ever been in these places? How many people have ever, traveled and, once you travel, you find that mural in the city that has that city's name on it. All right? How many of you have ever taken a picture in front of that mural, wherever you are with that city's name? If you had it, you need to do that. And sometimes they design like postcards, and it says either greetings from that city or welcome to that city. So we decided to welcome people to the neighborhood and welcome people to Montgomery. We wanted to. We thought about how can we do this? Maybe if we did a mural, we can actually get somebody to actually gather in this space. We're going to test out this creative placemaking data that Ann Marcusson and Galvanica Demas had ready for the National Endowment for the Arts, which is our government-funded arts entity, which is in trouble right now. We wanted to be able to have a performing arts space because we have a lot of musicians in the area that we connect with, and that's the arts too. We wanted to be able to have a retail space because I know for long-term sustainability, we cannot survive simply off of the generous donations of our monthly, quarterly, and annual donors and our one-time givers, which we definitely need. But we also can't survive off of grants. I have a friend, Michelle Browder, who tells me all the time, live on a grant, die on a grant. So we have to be strategic in how we diversify our revenue stream. So we said, well, maybe one day we can have a retail space. If we have a shot at creating a space where tourists can actually frequent, along with the locals from the community. So I had this vision. This is just a little raggedy drawing I drew, right? Then we did this. A friend of mine, Kanisha Brown, called me one day, and she said, Kevin, we want to do a voters registration drive. We want to do a votercade. We want to start in Selma. We want to end in Montgomery. And we want to have this big celebration at the King's Canvas. And we want to register people to vote. We want to make sure that people are civically engaged and politically aware. I said, Kanisha, all that sounds good, but why here? Now, I knew why, but I needed for her to substantiate the data. And so I said, well, why here, Kanisha? She said, you have a vacant lot next to your building, next to your studio, and I just think that'd be a good spot for it. And she's from the west side, so I said, Kanisha, we got vacant lots all over the hood. What else? And she said, Kevin, it'll look good in pictures. Now, can we have her in there? Of course it'll look good in pictures because, our commission went for Hawkins to do it in this building, right? So, one of the things that I noticed is it is still a great sense of community pride that I expected to happen, but I didn't expect to happen in the way that it happened. I posted this image and it just went viral, just started floating all over the place, right? Because not only says Montgomery, but it says west side Montgomery. So on the west side, people were like, yo, what is this? There was a young lady who posted it on her Facebook page, and her caption read, the west side is coming back. And underneath she said, y'all better not mess it up. She was taking ownership. So we started doing block parties. I started seeing people walk through Washington Park that you would never see people walk through Washington Park. They clearly weren't from there, if you understand what I'm saying. And I would ask the question, how do y'all find out about this place? Well, we Googled Montgomery mural and it's popular. We Googled Montgomery art, it's popular. They don't know where they are. They don't know that they used to call this neighborhood the war zone. But these young men, these young women, or whomever, they decided that they wanted to come and take a picture in front of it. And that's what they did. And if I was there, I would take them aside and I would show them the studio and some of them about artwork. They would engage with our artists who were there. Tourists started coming by just to take pictures in front of it and to see our space. As far as our economic impact is concerned, we started having pop-ups at this block party. A couple of artists used to say, hey, Kevin, man, I like doing events over here. And we just didn't do events at this space. We were all over the city, primarily downtown. Every time I do an event with the King's Canvas, I made no less than $600. Man, I can pay my bills today. And so, personally, it started making an economic impact for the artists who were involved. And I was like, okay, we own something. Anybody ever heard of our friend Anthony Brock of Bad Cross Academy? Okay, a few of you? Okay. They run an all-boys school downtown. You may have seen the fellas with the bow ties walking up and down the street, hollering at people. He was standing somewhere over here in this corner, kind of off to himself, being antisocial. He's not antisocial. You can tell he was in deep thought. And I walked over being silly like I am, like, hey, what's wrong, man? Why you just being antisocial and not talking about it? What's wrong with you? just shook his head. He said, Kevin, I don't understand how you did this. He said, we have different ethnicities of people in this space. We have different age ranges. People are interacting that I've never seen interact before. That's not a fence around this space. These people are not afraid to be in West Montgomery. How in the world did you do this? Then he asked a question. He said, is there anybody in that space next door to you? I said, no, not yet. I knew what Anthony was getting at, because the creative placemaking data also says once you start doing this, and once you increase your foot traffic, business is important. So Anthony said, well, I called Dr. Brock out as of last week. Dr. Brock said, what do you think if we open up a coffee shop and bookstore next door to you and have a literacy center so we can do literacy tutoring with the children in the community and bring them into the space, and we can just use it as an additional space to support the vision? I said, I think that would be a dope idea. We're gonna get to that in a minute. So then we did this. The guy across the street from me at the restaurant, Barbara Gales, during the pandemic, 2020, he said, Kevin, we used to love going over there eating on the inside. And it's one of those older lunch counter style type city, lunch counter style type restaurants. And he had a few tables and chairs in there, and we used to love to go over there and eat. But Larry said, Kevin, we have to social distance. I'm about to rearrange this space and create a couple of extra checkout spaces, because we got to get people in and out. I ain't never let nobody eat on the inside. I said, ever? I kind of miss eating on the inside. So I said, okay, Larry, if you're going to have an in and out situation over here, we're going to build a deck out in front of our space just so the customers can come across the street. So now I'm trying to figure out how do we collaborate with the community and provide the community needs. We also understood that people started having more and more events. They would have to bring out a stage, set up the stage in the vacant spaces, and they would do their concerts. Break down the stage and take it, but it was just a lot of work. So we got a Hyundai brand, and we ended up building the stage off to the side. And they use all the time now. So this increased community engagement. Once we start to beautify the space and renovate it, things start looking new, things start looking fresh. Fresh paint, nicely manicured lawn, and a couple of slab of concrete does wonders for it. So people just started engaging. The community really started taking ownership. There was and I tell a lot of stories, y'all, so bear with me. There's an older gentleman who also remembers what the neighborhood was prior to the construction of the interstate, who lives behind our facility. He bought a piece of property across the street from our facility. That's where he parks his 18 wheeler. He drives every day, right? He goes out early in the morning. He's home in the evening. We had an event, and all of us on the group chat, every single nonprofit organization leader, every single business owners, and some of the residents on Oak Street, we're all in the group chat together because nothing happens in our spaces without us knowing about it first, events, whatever. We communicate with each other before we actually put the information out public. And he doesn't ever respond in the group chat, but he always knows what's going on. So I went over there to remind him. I said, Mr. Julius, remember, we have an event, man. I just want to remind you that we have an event coming up this weekend. He just kind of had this frown on his face, this old man frown. I'm 46, so the older I understand, you just frowning for no reason every now. He said, Kevin, this neighborhood was dead. Now it's alive. He flipped his wrist over, put 2 fingers on his pulse. He said this neighborhood had no pulse. Now it has a pulse again. He just kind of laughed and shook his head like he couldn't believe it. He said, man, I never thought I'd live to see this. Because Mr. Julius, just like Skip Jackson, he remembers what this neighborhood used to be. Every time we have an event, there's hundreds of people. And he sits out on the porch, he watches. If I get the grass cut, that's not going to be enough for him. I can get the grass cut the day before the event. He's going to cut the grass again the day of just to make sure that it's cut. the type of ownership Mr. Julius is taking, and how much he loves what's going on in the community. That's affirming for us, because people from the outside, you know, sing your praises all day long. But my question is, what do the people who actually live there think about what's happening? The relationships that I've built in this community the last 19 years, what are they actually thinking? What's their take on the situation? And so, as far as our daily activation is concerned, this is what it looks like now. We have events, people come out with blankets, lawn chairs, and another guy in the neighborhood, his name, I don't know his real name, but we call him Popsicle. He Popsicle remembers how the community used to look. He grew up on Oak Street. He's constantly telling me, Kevin, you need to look at this. I said, yeah, I see it, Popsicle. I'm running around. Kevin, you need to take pictures of this. You need to document this. You need to take videos. And I kept asking him why. He said, man, it seems like we downtown. I never thought that we could be on my street in the neighborhood that I grew up in, and we can have some sort of downtown vibe with the music, with the food trucks, with the art, blankets, and the lawn chairs, and people having coolers with them. Everybody's having a good time. Artists are out painting. A good friend of mine, Quan Robinson, is to the right. You know, he brings people by. When the chamber brings people in, they bring people by the King's Camps to see what's going on. And then you have my friend Quan in the back. She going in on that plate. Quan was not looking up. She was going in on that plate. You know, we have full bands that come out. You see that? It's went from a space that was an eyesore to everybody. No one wanted to be there. Matter of fact, I lived over there. I didn't even recognize what this place was before then, because there was no reason to look at it. But when you're rooted in place and you can actually reimagine what you want for your community, or what your community could be, and you decide not to let what's perceived as being negative elements stop you from doing it, you realize when you do stuff like this, me and Larry Bethune, the guy who owns Barbara Gales, we were having a conversation one day and said, man, you know what the talk of the town is, what the talk of the neighborhood is. Like, man, what did they say? They said, man, it's a neutral spot. Nobody want to act a fool up over here. No one wants to mess this up. People come over here because it provides an element of safety for them. Look at those people. Look at the smiles on their faces. And then this happened. I didn't even know that this was going to happen. Doing something in Washington Park at night. I'm serious. A friend of mine, John Boy, who has a band called The Verge, he had this wild idea and say, hey, Kevin, I want to do something over there at night. And I was like, huh? At night? You crazy? You know what you want? Yeah, man, I think it'll work. And so even for me, being a visionary I am, sometimes we need a community challenges, because even my vision was limited. I never would have initiated anything like this. And that's the norm. John Boy decided that he wanted to have a nighttime event, and he wanted to invite people to come out to enjoy themselves. And guess what? The first time we did it, there was no security. No permits, no police protection. And most of the time, that's the way that it is. And nobody asks for it. Nobody's getting violent, nobody's getting rowdy, nobody's hurting one another. People just want to have a good time. The guys in the neighborhood who used to sell drugs, they there. The whole time they're saying, Kevin, I love what you did with the neighborhood. Man, I wish we would have been in contact a long time ago, because moving into the neighborhood, you got a black guy and a white guy moving in, start an organization, automatically we were feds. We're the police. So for years they didn't talk to us at all, because they thought that we were actually planted there to figure out who they were, what they were doing, so we could be arrested. And we just want to come to the community and work with children prior to all of this. And so now these guys are coming around, and they have legitimate businesses now. And they like, man, you guys are doing an awesome job with this neighborhood. I grew up here. I used to play over here. And they're amazed at all of the things that are happening. The guy that I was telling you about, that's him in the middle, Anthony Brown. He used to want to run to school downtown, and that's his daughter, right? We have community members who decided that they want to have birthday parties. They just make up stuff, just make up these things. We want to have a birthday party. We had a young lady in the back making funnel cakes. you know. And sometimes at night, we out there by ourselves, and a friend of mine runs the Europe, he just decided, hey, I'm gonna just tap into your Wi-Fi. I just need to sit out one day by myself. Well, I guess he wasn't by himself because I'm snapping pictures of him. But, you know, it was peaceful. He has a cigar, he has his computer, he's getting work done. So, when you look at the interior space, and I'm kind of jumping out of order because I needed to segment some of the things that we've done. I'm almost done. To the left is what the space looked like when we first moved into it. And this was a lot of spaces. It used to be dry cleaners in the back. It was a beauty salon at one point back in the days. A lot of elders come by and say, I used to get my hair done here. You know, my mother used to bring me in, my grandmother used to bring me in. And prior to us moving in, it was a 5-star barbershop owned by a friend of mine by the name of Corey. And so we just ended up slapping some paint on the walls, cleaning up the best way we could, and it's what you see to the right. Because artists needed a space to create, so we just kind of created a little art studio. You know, and it would be so packed in there, people's artwork would be getting damaged, needles would fall over, and poking holes in people's work, and I was like, man, we gotta get out of here. But we were having a good time. People taking pictures in front of the art. On the bed days, they would kind of, you know, because that was the only space for them to visit on the inside. Because the building is not huge, but this was the only activated space that we had on the inside. Now it looks like that. Because we had to get up out of here. And a lot of times what we do is we like to identify barriers that are in place that prevent artists from having economic opportunities. And one of the barriers that were in place is you don't have your work exhibited or hanging in a professional gallery studio or a professional gallery if you've never had that before. That is individual artist grants that they have. And before you start the application, right under your name and all of that information, they would ask the question, have you ever exhibited your work in a professional gallery? If you check no, you cannot complete the rest of the application. Therefore, you haven't had the access and opportunity to be able to compete with a lot of these individual artist grants that are out here. So how do we rectify that? We had to create a gallery. We had to open up a gallery. This Thursday, we have a BTW student doing his first solo show. It's our first solo show at the gallery. All of them that we've done since December have been collective shows, but we're doing our first solo show. We're having it maybe Thursday around 5 o'clock. I invite you to come out to the King's Campus at 1413 Oak Street. And so as far as our studio is concerned, we had this little dungeon to the left that was really rough. Now that looks good right here. That's after we cleaned it out. But now it's what you see to the right is an art studio because we needed more space. We have artists coming by and create. We have tour groups that come in. They'll go to a lot of the civil rights sites in the city, and they'll need to decompress. And so they'll come to us and we'll place artists with them. And we have artists who will do history-driven paint projects with them. Sometimes it's not history, sometimes it's just them doing art for art's sake. We have students, coming in. We have children coming in, to paint and draw and participate in art. We have people bringing their children in. The guy that I told you about, Anthony Brock, that's his brother, and that's the owner of Brother's Barbecue. That's what we're doing on the left. They transformed that space. When he said, hey, who's next door to you? What if we did this? That's what they did on the right. That's what it looks like now. We're still going. We're not done yet. Oftentimes, I don't even slow down long enough to think about the things that we have done because we still have a long way to go. Thankfully, we have good partners in our community. This guy on the left, Siona Johnson, when he saw what we did down the street, he said, man, well, they're going to see me before they get to you, so I feel like I need to beautify my building just to kind of set the stage. So he took a bunch of civil rights icons like John Lewis and George Washington Carver, Booker T. Washington, He even got Alan Holmes over there to the left. And he just put all of them in the chair, and they just get happiness. And because he did that, he gets more business for some reason. But Sione also gets it. Sione says, hey man, something is happening on Oak Street. So he bought another building on Oak Street, and he rented it out to a restaurant that I probably eat at about 3 times a day. Well, a week, I'm sorry. To the right, you have Barbara Gales, who got a break from what it looked like I eat 3 times a day. To the right, you have Barbara Gales Neighborhood Grill. The guy with the best on, that's Go Lucky, that's our neighborhood security. Every time we do something, Go Lucky is sit on the porch. You know, no matter who's there, he's gonna want to get on the mic and sing. So we let Go Lucky sing every single time. We got about 2 or 3 songs that he rotates in between. Everyone knows Go Lucky. But beautifying our neighborhood, just trying to find spaces, just trying to find walls, trying to find ways to create art. The owner, Barbara Gale, said, ever since you've been over here, my business has increased. So now he has a capacity issue. He's trying to figure out, how did I grow so much? And he directly tied it into what we were doing. And that goes back to that creative community, well, the creative placemaking strategy. Using the arts to address issues of community and economic development. And not only involves the artists earning income, but that involves businesses that are located in our area now earning more income because of the influx of people that's not coming into the community. You have House to House on the left. That's another one of our partners. I spoke about them earlier. Then we have Nick Rankins and Ashley Monique Robinson. She's, I think, Ashley. Some of y'all here know Ashley, right? I think she teaches here. She teaches here? Yeah, so Ashley, her spot is on our street. You know, and they do a lot of cool stuff outside the chamber. We also partner with the Beacon Center. My office is actually at the Beacon Center. And, you know, that building was hideous. And in communities like West Montgomery, a lot of the businesses have these overhead doors, these roll-up doors, because they want to make sure that they can lock it just in case someone decides to come in and walk around their building unwanted, and maybe, you know, leave with a few items that don't belong to them. And so I said, okay, well, how can we fix this? This thing is ugly. And so Pastor Richard Williams, the director of the Beacon Center, had a vision of beautifying those spaces. And so we do a really good job at just trying to celebrate our wins, celebrate the community. We celebrate together no matter what. I remember when we built our deck, Sheriff Johnson, who was, I forgot which Rotary Club it was, but 3 Rotary Clubs got together to dedicate our deck. She wanted me to stand on the deck and speak as the attendees. How much time am I working with? How much time do I have?
Like 15 minutes?
Okay, I'll be done.
Okay.
And so she wanted me to get up there and speak about just the work that the King's campus is doing, and I want to thank her, but I told her, I said, hey, it's not about me. I don't want people to look at Kevin King and King's campus, and what we do is about what we do. So I invited all of the business owners and nonprofit leaders on that street. I invited them on the stage. I said, y'all just give them 60 seconds, because we ain't got all that time. Just give them 60 seconds, tell them who you are and what you do. And we use opportunities to celebrate with the community. This was the opening of our gallery on December 8th, and you see Carter Goodman buildings there. We basically provided a lot of pro bono work for us to be able to open so quickly. And you have Councilwoman Riley on my left, and behind her is our first board chair, Tracy Howard. And I credited her as being the one who kind of kicked off the art community years ago. And the guy behind me, Kirby Tones, that's one of our artists and buildings. He practically live in that place. Sometimes he spend a nice day and paints all night. So that's who we are. The King's Canvas is a creative placemaking space providing opportunity and access for underdeveloped and underexposed artists. And what we love to do is use these creative placemaking principles, or what we, I guess some people now call it creative practice, as a conduit, using the arts as a conduit to address issues of community and economic development. We're gonna keep going. We have a restaurant coming in. We also have, I just got approved for a round of funding. We're about to open up a gift shop because for long-term sustainability, we have to provide stuff stuff, not only for the community, but for tourists to be able to develop additional income stream to support our operations. So that's my goal. We have 5 spaces that are inside of our space. And 3 out of 5 is activated. So activating, making the main properties through using the arts. It's our thing. And I would say 6 spaces because we also activated the land. So that's who we are. That's who we are. Thank you for sitting here listening to me rambling you the whole time. Are there any questions?
Who has a question? It's a really cool story, isn't it?
No pressure. No
Yeah,
pressure.
no pressure.
Thank you so much for sharing the story. What would you consider the tipping point? When did you feel like there was enough momentum and energy that it was going to work?
So I think early on in my fundraising efforts, because I'm a data guy, and so a lot of what we do is data driven. And so being in Phoenix, Arizona, and then I think after that we went to the grant making and the arts summit in Twin Cities, and I saw what other people were doing, and I said, well, if they're doing that there, why wouldn't they be able to work in an area like Washington Park? And so I think it was a combination of that. It was a combination of actually living in the community and building relationships and talking to people about the community about what I was doing. But I think the tipping point when I was actually able to raise some money to get in and do it. Because that's always a barrier, right? We always have economic barriers to that keep us from getting to the places where we want to be if we don't have the funding. So a few good people jumped on board and said, hey, we believe in it. And I think it was at that point we kind of ran with it. And sometimes people in the city are like, man, Kevin, you're always in the news. You're always in the, WSFA, WAKA, you're always in the papers. They don't show up for us like that. I said, well, man, we can't afford publicists. We have to be our own publicists. I said, those times that people showed up, that's because I called them and asked them to come. Because I knew if I got that level of exposure, more people would know about it, so we would get more funding and continue the work that we were doing. So, and it was just crazy fate too, man. I just knew that it would, but that did not prevent me from developing a realistic strategy that we can actually implement step by step. Everything that you're seeing, I talked about this 2017 and 18, so we really aren't doing anything new. We're just kind of unfolding the plan as we originally set out. Yeah. Thank you.
What is the biggest challenge for your organization? Is it financial, manpower, other resources?
So I think financial is the easy one, because that's a challenge for all organizations, because no matter who you are, organization is just struggling, and we have been for a long time. But I think one of my huge challenges is the lack of support sometimes. Without going deep into it, oftentimes you hear in certain circles that people are blocking you. You hear people who reveal that they don't want to support because it wasn't their idea. You see, you find out that you've been written in grants that you knew nothing of, but people have actually gotten funded for it. And when someone on the inside sends you the grant and you see the King's Canvas and all of the work that we're doing written in someone's grant, and they actually use that data to get the funding that they needed, but they don't tell us about it, but they get funding, and we don't, but they use us to do it. I think that's the most disheartening thing, because that's definitely an economic barrier when you have people, especially people who are in positions of power to make things happen, who don't use that authority to help because they don't fully support because it wasn't their idea. And it can be speculative, but some of us have found it out recently that, it was actually substantiated by people who have kind of heard things that they weren't supposed to hear. So people block them, and that's just a common thing in Montgomery. People don't like, they respect what you do from afar, but there are barriers that people put in place that keep us from getting to where we need to be, and we never know about it until you know, someone actually tells on it. You know, then we end up confronting them about it. Nothing happens, it's just like, oh, I'm sorry, I won't do it again, that type of thing, like literally. So, yeah.
This grant that we worked on is civil rights to civic virtue, and some of the civic virtues are hope and perseverance, and we looked at the civil rights movement and how there was hope, you know, even in times that there didn't seem to be reason for hope. But what you've done is you have a vision and had hope to keep persevering,
Absolutely.
and you've given that whole community hope. Do you have any thoughts on what has sustained you and pushing through some of the barriers?
So, I mean, one of my faith sustains me. So that's a real big thing to me. I mean, everyone knows Common Ground is a faith-based organization. King's Campus isn't, even though the name is rooted in that. But outside of that, I would say it's my community. It's a community of people around us who are going through similar things, and it's people who are around us who don't necessarily understand what we're going through, but they've been extremely supportive. And so that may seem like it's a blanket answer, but this work is hard. It's tough. It's tough to the point where I mean, you mentioned Creative Community Strategist LLC. I'm now helping other people do this work. You know, I just got my, you know, I've got a few contracts, but got a big one out of Louisiana, and I'm helping other cultural sites do the work. And my goal is to make sure that they have, you know, hope in order to get through some of the things that they're going to go through. And so for me, I'm just trying to take what I've received, and I'm trying to pass it along to others and encourage other people. Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, I do want to thank you. You have given Montgomery a highlight and a hope in an area that had so little, and you've inspired us all today.
I hope y'all were inspired.
Yeah, let's give it a round.